If you're reading this, I probably didn't make it out. I know how that sounds. Melodramatic, like the start of some internet ghost story. But I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here because I have to be. Because there are things I'm not supposed to tell you, but you need to know. Maybe you'll be smarter than I was. Maybe you'll listen. I'm writing this from the security office, hunched over a battered keyboard. The hum of the monitor is the only thing keeping me company. It's 2:13 a.m. The mall is dead quiet, except for the occasional rattle of the air conditioning and the distant, echoing creak of something moving where nothing should be moving. I keep glancing at the door, half expecting to see a shadow slip under the crack, or worse, hear the soft, plastic tap of mannequin fingers on the glass. You've probably seen those stories online. I worked the night shift at X. There were rules to follow. Most of them are fake. I used to think they all were. But the rules here are real. And if you break them, you don't get a second chance. Most people don't make it to the end. I'm not sure I will either. I know what you're thinking. It's just a mall. What could possibly happen in a place built for food courts and shoe sales? That's what I thought too. I thought the worst thing I'd have to deal with was a couple of bored teenagers, or maybe a raccoon in the dumpster. But there's a reason the Nightguard job pays so well. There's a reason the last guy left without picking up his final paycheck. I can't tell you everything. Not yet. Some things you have to see for yourself to believe. But if you're ever offered a job like this, or if you find yourself somewhere with a list of rules that don't make sense, don't laugh. Don't ignore them. And whatever you do, don't break them. Let me start from the beginning, before I knew what the rules really meant. It's almost funny, looking back, how normal it all seemed at first. I was just another broke 20-something, scrolling through job listings at 2 a.m., desperate for anything that would pay the rent. My last gig had ended with a pink slip and a handshake that felt more like a shove. I'd burned through my savings faster than I'd admit to anyone, and the bills were stacking up like a game of Jenga I was destined to lose. That's when I saw the ad. Night security needed, immediate start, competitive pay, no experience necessary. The mall was only a few miles from my apartment, and the pay was almost double what I'd made at my last job. It sounded too good to be true, but I was too tired and too broke to care. I clicked apply without a second thought. The next morning, I got a call. The voice on the other end was calm, almost bored, and told me to come in for an interview that afternoon. No phone screening, no background check, just a time and a place. I should have paid more attention to the fine print, but all I saw was a lifeline. The mall looked different in daylight. Just another aging shopping center with faded banners and a parking lot full of potholes. The security office was tucked away behind a service corridor, past a door marked staff only. The manager, Mr. Harlan, was waiting for me. He was a thin man with a smile that never quite reached his eyes, and he shook my hand with a grip that felt like he was sizing me up for something. The interview was odd. He didn't ask about my experience or why I wanted the job. Instead, he asked if I believed in following instructions, even if they didn't make sense. If I could keep calm under pressure. If I had any allergies to cleaning chemicals or latex. I laughed, thinking it was some kind of weird HR thing, but he just nodded and scribbled something on his clipboard. Then came the contract. It was longer than any I'd ever seen for a minimum wage job. Pages and pages of legalese, most of it standard, but some of it strange. There were clauses about unusual working conditions, non-disclosure of operational protocols, and a section that said I wouldn't hold the company liable for psychological distress or anomalous events. I skimmed it, signed at the bottom, and handed it back. I should have read every word. Before I left, Mr. Harlan handed me a sealed envelope. "Read this before your first shift," he said, his voice suddenly serious. "And remember, these rules aren't a joke. If you have any questions, don't ask them here." I laughed again, but he didn't. He just watched me, his eyes flat and unblinking, until I left the office. I remember thinking he was just another middle manager with a stick up his ass. I didn't realize he was the last person who'd ever look at me like I was still just a regular guy. I spent the rest of the day convincing myself I'd landed on my feet. I told myself the weirdness was just corporate paranoia, that every job had its quirks. I even called my mom to tell her I'd finally caught a break. She sounded relieved, and for a moment, so was I. But the real warning came with the rules. The envelope was heavier than I expected, thick with folded paper and the faintest whiff of something chemical, like old cleaning supplies or the inside of a Halloween mask. I tossed it on my kitchen table and stared at it for a while, half expecting it to start ticking or whispering. When nothing happened, I tore it open and pulled out a single sheet, typed in all caps, with the words, "Night Security Protocols. Strict compliance required," stamped across the top in red. I'll admit, I laughed. I'd worked retail before. I'd seen my share of emergency procedures and loss prevention guidelines. I figured this was just more corporate nonsense. But as I started reading, my smile faded. Rule number 1. Never look at the mannequins after midnight. That was it. No explanation, no context. Just a line that sounded like the setup to a bad campfire story. I snorted and kept reading. Rule number 2. If you hear footsteps in the service corridor, do not investigate. Lock the office door and wait 5 minutes. Rule number 3. The food court lights will flicker at 1:17 a.m. Do not attempt to fix them. Do not enter the food court until the lights are steady. Rule number 4. If you see a child alone in the mall after closing, do not approach. Notify management immediately. Rule number 5. At 3:33 a.m., you may hear music coming from the carousel. Do not acknowledge it. Do not look at the carousel. Rule number 6. If the cleaning crew knocks on the office door before 4 a.m., do not let them in. The real crew arrives at 4 o'clock. Rule number 7. If you find a store open that should be closed, close your eyes, count to 10, and walk away. Do not enter. Rule number 8. If you receive a phone call on the office line and the caller asks for someone who doesn't work at the mall, hang up immediately. Rule number 9. If you see your own reflection wave at you, leave the area and do not return until your next shift. Rule number 10. At sunrise, leave through the north exit. Do not use any other door. Some rules made sense. Others, I wish I'd never learned why they existed. I read the list twice, then a third time, waiting for the punchline. Was this some kind of hazing ritual? A way to mess with the new guy? I could almost hear the laughter of bored security guards in the break room, waiting for me to freak out over a prank. I even checked the back of the page for a welcome to the team or a doodle of a smiley face. Nothing. I texted a friend. Dude, my new job gave me a list of rules straight out of a creepypasta. Should I be worried or just bring a flashlight and a crucifix? He replied with a string of laughing emojis and a meme about haunted malls. I laughed too, but it felt forced. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me as I read. The apartment felt colder, the shadows a little deeper. I told myself it was just nerves, the usual pre-first day jitters. I folded the rules and stuck them in my jacket pocket, figuring I'd show them to the first coworker I met and get a good laugh. But as I got ready for my shift, I kept thinking about the specifics. Why 1:17 a.m.? Why 3:33? Why the north exit? And what was with the mannequins? I'd always found them creepy, but I'd never thought of them as dangerous. I pictured myself, flashlight in hand, tiptoeing past a row of plastic smiles, trying not to make eye contact. The image made me snort, but my hands were sweating. I almost called Mr. Harlan to ask if this was some kind of joke, but I remembered his face. How serious he'd been when he handed me the envelope. These rules aren't a joke. His words echoed in my head, and for a second, I wondered if I should just walk away. But the rent was due, and I needed the job. Besides, what was the worst that could happen? I'd follow the rules, collect my paycheck, and maybe have a weird story to tell at parties. The first night, I thought it was all a joke. I was wrong. My first night on the job started with all the excitement of a wet paper towel. I clocked in at 10:58 p.m., signed a logbook that looked like it hadn't been touched in months, and found myself alone in the security office, surrounded by flickering monitors and the faint smell of burnt coffee. The mall after hours was nothing like the bustling, fluorescent-lit chaos I remembered from my teenage years. It was a tomb, silent, empty, and echoing with the ghosts of 1,000 forgotten shopping trips. I spent the first hour doing what any bored Nightguard would do, scrolling through my phone, spinning in the creaky office chair, and watching the grainy black and white feeds for any sign of life. The only movement came from a janitor mopping near the main entrance, his headphones in, oblivious to the world. I almost convinced myself the rules were just a weird HR test, a way to see if I'd take the job seriously. But boredom is a dangerous thing. It makes you curious. It makes you careless. Around midnight, I remembered rule number 1. Never look at the mannequins after midnight. I glanced at the clock. 12:03 a.m. The camera feed for the women's clothing store showed a row of mannequins, frozen in their plastic perfection, arms cocked at impossible angles, faces blank and serene. I stared at them, half expecting something to happen. Nothing did. I snorted, feeling a little braver, and decided to do a quick patrol. The mall was colder than I expected, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes your teeth ache. My footsteps echoed down the empty corridors, bouncing off shuttered storefronts and darkened kiosks. I passed the food court, the carousel, the arcade, each one more lifeless than the last. When I reached the women's store, I paused. The mannequins stood in a neat row, just like on the camera. I stepped closer, shining my flashlight over their faces. Their eyes, if you could call them that, were just painted ovals, but in the harsh beam, they seemed to glint with something almost alive. I laughed, shaking my head. Sorry, ladies. Just doing my rounds. I turned to leave, but something made me glance back. One of the mannequins, one I could have sworn was facing the window, was now turned slightly toward the aisle, her hand raised as if to wave. I froze, the hair on my arms standing up. I told myself I was imagining it, that I'd just missed her pose the first time. But as I backed away, I heard a faint, plastic creak, like a joint settling into place. I hurried back to the office, my heart thumping a little too fast. I tried to laugh it off, but every time I looked at the monitor, that same mannequin seemed a little closer to the glass. I told myself it was just the camera angle, a trick of the light. But I locked the office door anyway. That was the first time I heard the footsteps. They started as a soft, rhythmic tapping in the service corridor. Too slow to be the janitor, too heavy to be a rat. I remembered rule number 2. If you hear footsteps in the service corridor, do not investigate. Lock the office door and wait 5 minutes. I stared at the clock, counting down the seconds, my breath fogging the glass of the monitor. The footsteps stopped just outside the door, then faded away. When the 5 minutes were up, I opened the door and found nothing but silence. No sign of anyone, no footprints, nothing. I told myself it was just nerves, that I was letting the rules get to me. But I kept the door locked for the rest of the night. I should have quit then, but I needed the money. The next few nights blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and mounting dread. By day, the mall was a monument to banality. Families shuffling from store to store, teenagers loitering by the fountain, the scent of pretzels and cheap perfume hanging in the air. I'd watch the morning staff clock in, all smiles and small talk, and wonder if any of them had the faintest idea what happened after the sun went down. But at night, the mall became something else. The air felt heavier, the shadows deeper. The rules stopped feeling like a joke and started to feel like a lifeline. It didn't take long for me to slip up again. On my third night, I was making my rounds when I noticed the food court lights flickering. I checked my watch. 1:17 a.m., right on schedule. Rule number 3, do not attempt to fix them. Do not enter the food court until the lights are steady. But the flickering was so annoying, and I was tired, and I just wanted to get through my checklist. So I stepped into the food court, just for a second. The lights buzzed overhead, strobing in and out. For a moment, everything looked normal. Empty tables, chairs stacked, the smell of stale fries lingering in the air. Then, in the corner of my eye, I saw a movement. I turned, expecting to see a stray cat or maybe a bird that had gotten trapped. Instead, I saw a figure standing by the carousel, just at the edge of the darkness. It was too far away to make out details, but I could see the outline of a child, motionless, watching me. I blinked, and the lights snapped back to normal. The figure was gone. My heart hammered in my chest as I backed out of the food court, repeating the rule in my head like a prayer. I didn't sleep when I got home that morning. The next night, I ran into the janitor, Luis, as he was finishing up his shift. He was older, with a limp and a face that looked like it had seen too many winters. He nodded at me, his eyes tired but kind. "You're the new night guy, right?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "Yeah, trying to be, anyway," I said, forcing a smile. "You ever get used to the weird stuff around here?" Luis's face darkened. He glanced over his shoulder, then leaned in. "Don't ask about the food court after 2 a.m., he whispered. "And if you hear music from the carousel, just keep walking. Don't look. Don't listen." I tried to laugh it off, but he didn't smile. "Seriously, man, some things in this place, they don't want to be seen. You follow the rules, you'll be fine. Most of the time." I wanted to ask more, but he just shook his head and limped away, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a growing sense of unease. The rules started to feel less like guidelines and more like warnings carved into stone. Every time I got cocky, the mall reminded me who was really in charge. On my 5th night, I got a call on the office line. The voice on the other end was thin and static-filled, asking for someone named Evelyn. I remembered rule number 8, hang up immediately. But curiosity got the better of me. Sorry, you have the wrong number, I said. There was a long pause. Then, in a voice that sounded like it was coming from underwater, the caller whispered, "She's waiting for you." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my skin crawling. Later that night, I passed a store that should have been closed. The gate was up, the lights on, and inside, the mannequins were arranged in a circle, all facing inward. I remembered rule number 7, close your eyes, count to 10, and walk away. But I couldn't help myself. I peeked through the glass. For a split second, I saw something move in the center of the circle, something pale and long-limbed, crawling on all fours. I squeezed my eyes shut, counted to 10, and when I opened them, the store was dark and empty again. I stumbled back to the office, shaking. The next morning, I tried to talk to Mr. Harlan. He was waiting for me in the office, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone like nothing was wrong. "Rough night?" he asked, not looking up. "Yeah, you could say that. What's with the rules, anyway? Is this some kind of test?" He finally looked at me, his eyes cold and flat. "The rules are there for your protection. Break them, and you're on your own. That's all you need to know." I wanted to push, to demand answers, but something in his tone made me stop. He handed me my paycheck and told me to get some rest. I left the mall that morning feeling like I was walking out of a nightmare and into a world that no longer made sense. The sunlight felt wrong on my skin, too bright, too harsh. I watched the other employees laugh and chat as they started their day, and I wondered how many of them had ever seen the mall after midnight. I wish I'd listened to Luis. I wish I'd never picked up that phone. But the worst was yet to come. I heard screaming from the closed-off wing. I had to go. It was my 7th night, and by then, the rules had become a second skin. Itchy, uncomfortable, but always there. I'd learned to keep my head down, to ignore the flickering lights and the shadows that moved just out of sight. I'd learned to trust my instincts, even when they screamed at me to run. But nothing prepared me for the sound of someone in real pain, echoing through the empty halls at 2:41 a.m. The closed-off wing was a relic from the mall's glory days, sealed behind a heavy metal gate and a sign that read, "Under renovation, do not enter." I'd never seen anyone go in or out, and the cameras covering that section always showed nothing but darkness and dust. Rule number 7 was clear. If you find a store open that should be closed, close your eyes, count to 10, and walk away. But this wasn't a store. This was a whole wing, and someone was screaming for help. I hesitated at the gate, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The screaming had stopped, replaced by a low, desperate sobbing. I told myself it was probably a prank, some kid who'd snuck in after hours. But deep down, I knew better. The mall didn't play by normal rules, and neither did whatever was waiting in that darkness. I took a deep breath, unlatched the gate, and stepped inside. The air was different, thicker, colder, heavy with the scent of mildew and something metallic. My footsteps echoed off the cracked tile, each one swallowed by the darkness ahead. The familiar mall was gone, replaced by a maze of empty storefronts and half-finished renovations. Plastic sheets hung from the ceiling like shrouds, fluttering in a breeze I couldn't feel. The only light came from my flashlight, a thin, trembling beam that barely cut through the gloom. I followed the sound of the sobbing, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. The further I went, the more the mall seemed to twist around me. Hallways that should have ended in dead ends stretched on forever, and doors that should have led to storage closets opened into pitch-black voids. I tried to keep track of my path, but every turn felt wrong, every step taking me further from the world I knew. Then I saw her, a girl, maybe 8 or 9, sitting on the floor in front of a boarded-up toy store. She was hugging her knees, her face buried in her arms, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I remembered rule number 4. If you see a child alone in the mall after closing, do not approach. Notify management immediately. But I couldn't just leave her there. "Hey," I called softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you okay? Are you lost?" She didn't look up. Instead, she started humming, a low, tuneless melody that made my skin crawl. The air around her seemed to ripple, the shadows growing longer, reaching for me. I took a step back, every instinct screaming at me to run. That's when the lights flickered and I saw them. Mannequins, dozens of them, lining the hallway behind her. They weren't there a second ago. Their faces were blank, but their heads were all turned toward me. their arms outstretched as if to welcome me into their embrace. The girl stopped humming and slowly raised her head. Her eyes were wrong, too wide, too dark, reflecting the light in a way that made my stomach twist. She smiled, and her teeth were sharp, too many for a human mouth. "Help me," she whispered, her voice echoing off the walls, layered with something ancient and hungry. I stumbled backward, my flashlight shaking. The mannequins began to move, their joints creaking, their plastic fingers scraping against the tile. They moved in jerky, unnatural bursts, closing the distance between us with impossible speed. I turned and ran, the sound of their footsteps, plastic and hollow, chasing me through the maze of the forbidden wing. I don't remember how I found my way out. One moment I was lost, the next I was bursting through the gate, slamming it shut behind me. The sobbing stopped. The mannequins were gone. The mall was silent again, as if nothing had happened. I collapsed in the security office, shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I tried to call Mr. Harlan, but the line was dead. I tried to text Luis, but my messages wouldn't send. I sat there until sunrise, staring at the monitors, waiting for something. Anything. To move. What I saw in there, I can't unsee. The rules weren't just for show. They were the only thing standing between me and whatever lived in the cracks of that place. I realized then that the mall wasn't just haunted. It was hungry, and the rules were the only thing keeping it fed on something other than me. After that night, I started keeping my own list of rules. After that night, sleep became a stranger. I'd lie awake, replaying the chase through the forbidden wing, the girl's two wide eyes, the mannequin's plastic hands reaching for me. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind, if the job was warping me into someone who saw monsters in every shadow. But the fear was real, and it gnawed at me until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed answers. I needed to know what I was up against. During the day, the mall was a different world. Sunlight poured through the skylights. Kids laughed by the fountain, and the carousel spun in lazy circles, its painted horses frozen in mid-gallop. Parents sipped coffee, teenagers flirted by the food court, and the only thing out of place was me. Haunted, hollow-eyed, jumping at every sudden noise. I started to notice things I'd missed before, the way the cleaning crew avoided certain hallways, the nervous glances between longtime employees, the way Mr. Harlan's smile never quite reached his eyes. I started asking questions, careful not to sound too paranoid. Luis, the janitor, was the only one who didn't brush me off. One afternoon, I caught him in the loading bay, smoking a cigarette and staring at the cracked pavement. "Hey, Luis," I said, trying to sound casual. "You ever hear about anything weird happening here?" Like, before I started, he took a long drag, exhaled, and didn't look at me. "You ever wonder why they always need a new Nightguard?" he said quietly. "Why nobody lasts more than a month?" I swallowed. What happened to the last guy? Luis flicked his cigarette away. He stopped following the rules. Thought he was smarter than them all. They found his badge in the service corridor. Never found him. I wanted to ask more, but he just shook his head and walked away, leaving me with more questions than answers. That night, I started digging. I searched for news articles, old forum posts, anything about the mall's history. Most of it was the usual urban decay. Stores closing, rumors of bankruptcy, the slow death of another American shopping center. But buried in the archives, I found something that made my blood run cold. A string of disappearances, all tied to the night shift. Security guards, janitors, even a manager or two, gone without a trace, their names barely mentioned in the local paper. The official story was always the same. Personal reasons, family emergency, no foul play suspected. But the pattern was there, if you knew where to look. I found a thread on an old message board, half buried under spam and broken links. The title was simple, Mall Nightguard Rules. Anyone else? The posts were frantic, desperate, full of people sharing their own lists of rules, their own stories of things that moved in the dark. Some talked about mannequins, others about shadows that whispered, or doors that led to places that shouldn't exist. Most of the accounts ended abruptly, the posters never returning to update their stories. There's a reason no one lasts more than a month here. I started to notice other things, too. Symbols scratched into the backs of store signs, circles with lines through them, strange runes that looked like they belonged in an old occult book. I found a door in the basement, padlocked and covered in warning stickers, with a sigil painted in red across the frame. When I asked Mr. Harlan about it, he just said, That's not your concern, and changed the subject. The more I learned, the more I realized I was being watched. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of movement in the security monitors, a shadow flickering just out of frame, a face in the glass that vanished when I looked closer. My phone would ring in the middle of the night, the caller ID blank, and when I answered, I'd hear nothing but static and the faint sound of carousel music. I started to feel like the mall itself was alive, aware of me, testing me. The rules weren't just for my safety. They were a leash, a way to keep me from digging too deep. But I couldn't stop. I needed to know the truth, even if it killed me. The mall was a community hub by day, a place for families and laughter and cheap food. But at night, it was something else. A labyrinth of secrets, a trap for the unwary, a mouth that swallowed the careless whole. I thought I could outsmart the rules. I was wrong. Tonight, the rules stopped working. I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped into the mall. The air was thick, almost syrupy, and the lights overhead flickered in a way I'd never seen before. Erratic, like the building itself was having a seizure. My footsteps echoed too loudly, bouncing off the tile and coming back to me warped and hollow. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just nerves, but deep down, I knew this was my last shift. I went through the motions, checking the doors, scanning the monitors, reciting the rules in my head like a prayer. But the rules felt flimsy now, like a child's blanket against a storm. The cameras glitched, showing static where there should have been empty corridors. The office phone rang, but when I picked up, all I heard was my own voice, whispering words I didn't remember saying. At 12:01 a.m., I glanced at the women's clothing store. The mannequins were gone, not just moved, gone. The display was empty, the glass reflecting only my own pale, terrified face. I checked the other feeds, but the mannequins had vanished from every store. My skin crawled. Rule number 1 was suddenly meaningless. I tried to call Mr. Harlan, but my phone was dead, the screen stuck on a single, flickering image. The carousel, spinning in the dark, its horses twisted into grotesque shapes. I slammed the phone down and locked the office door, but the lock felt useless, a toy against whatever was coming. At 1:17 a.m., the food court lights didn't flicker. They went out completely. The monitors showed only blackness, punctuated by brief flashes of movement. I saw shapes, too many limbs, too many eyes, crawling across the tables, dragging themselves toward the office. I pressed my back against the door, heart pounding, breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Then the footsteps started, not the slow, measured tapping I'd heard before, but a stampede. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of feet pounding the tile, coming from every direction. I remembered rule number 2, lock the office door and wait 5 minutes. But the clock on the wall was spinning, the hands whirling faster and faster until time itself seemed to unravel. The phone rang again. This time, I didn't answer. I just stared at it, willing it to stop. It didn't. The ringing grew louder, more insistent, until it was all I could hear. I covered my ears, but the sound burrowed into my skull, a drill made of pure panic. I don't know how long I sat there, paralyzed. Eventually, the ringing stopped. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. I opened my eyes and saw a message scrawled across the monitor in red, shaky letters. Come to the carousel. I knew I shouldn't go. Every instinct screamed at me to stay put, to wait for sunrise, to cling to the last shreds of the rules. But the office felt like a coffin, and the mall was closing in around me. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The mall was unrecognizable. The walls pulsed, breathing in and out, the floor rippling beneath my feet. The stores had melted into each other, their signs twisted into gibberish. Shadows darted at the edge of my vision, whispering my name in voices that sounded like broken glass. I stumbled toward the carousel, drawn by a music box melody that grew louder with every step. The horses spun in slow circles, their eyes following me, their mouths stretched into rictus grins. In the center of the carousel stood the girl from the Forbidden Wing, her dress stained with something dark, her smile too wide. "You broke the rules," she said, her voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "Now you have to choose." The mannequins surrounded the carousel, their arms outstretched, their faces blank. Behind them, I saw Luis, his eyes hollow, his mouth working silently. Mr. Harlan stood beside him, his suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. "Choose," the girl repeated. "Stay and become part of the mall, or leave and take the rules with you. But if you leave, someone else will have to take your place. I looked at the faces around me. Luis, Mr. Harlan, the mannequins, the girl. I thought about all the people who'd vanished, all the stories that ended without answers. I thought about you, reading this, wondering if you'd do any better. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But in the end, I did the only thing I could. I turned and ran for the north exit, the rules clutched in my hand, the sound of the carousel music chasing me through the twisting, impossible halls. If you're reading this, it means I found a way to warn you. It means I made it out, at least for now. But the mall isn't done. The rules are still there, waiting for the next desperate soul to break them. There's one last thing you need to know. If you ever see a job posting for a night guard at Crestwood Mall, run. Don't laugh, don't ask questions, don't even think about it. Just close your laptop, delete the email, and forget you ever saw it. I wish someone had told me that before I signed my name on the dotted line, before I let desperation blind me to the warning signs, before I learned what it really costs to survive a place like this. I'm not the same person who walked into that interview, clutching a resume and a handful of hope. That version of me was naive, hungry for a second chance, convinced that rules were just words on a page. I thought I could outsmart the system, that I could bend the rules and walk away with a paycheck and a story to tell. I didn't understand that the rules were the only thing standing between me and something much, much worse. Now, I see the world differently. I flinch at the sound of carousel music. I avoid my own reflection in dark windows. I wake up at 3:33 a.m., heart pounding, certain that I'll hear footsteps in the hallway. I keep the list of rules folded in my wallet, the paper worn thin from being read and reread. Sometimes, I catch myself reciting them under my breath, like a prayer or a curse. There are more rules than they tell you. Some you'll only learn when it's too late. Some you'll make up yourself, desperate to fill the gaps when the old ones stop working. And even then, you'll never really know if you're safe. The mall changes, adapts, finds new ways to test you. It's not just a building. It's a living thing, and it remembers everyone who's ever tried to outsmart it. Maybe you're reading this because you're curious, or because you think it's just another internet story. Maybe you're looking for answers, or for proof that you're not alone. I can't give you the ending you want. I don't know if I escaped, or if I'm just another ghost haunting the empty halls. Sometimes, I think I see my own face in the crowd, watching from behind the glass. But maybe you'll be smarter than I was. The job posting is back. Same title, same too good to be true pay, same desperate promise of no experience necessary. This time, it's a different name on the application. A college kid, maybe, or someone just as lost as I was. They scroll through the listing, hesitate, and then click apply. The cycle begins again. Maybe they'll find this post, buried in some forgotten corner of the internet. Or maybe they'll stumble across a crumpled note tucked behind the security desk. The ink smudged, but the message clear. Follow the rules. Don't ask questions. Don't break the pattern. Maybe they'll laugh, just like I did. Maybe they'll think it's all a joke. Until the first night, when the lights flicker and the mannequins start to move. If you're reading this, you're part of the story now. The rules are waiting for you. Have you ever worked a night shift? Did you have rules official or otherwise? Tell me below. I want to hear your stories, your theories, your warnings. Maybe together we can piece together the truth, or at least keep each other safe. If you've heard of other malls like this, or if you've got your own list of rules, don't keep it to yourself. Someone out there needs to know. And if you think this is just a story, remember, there are more malls like this. Maybe yours is one of them. Maybe the rules are already in place, just waiting for someone to break them. Be careful, watch the shadows, and whatever you do, don't look at the mannequins after midnight.